Welcome to the icy cold studios of Greenfield Community Television. My name is Bella Levavi, and I am the station manager here. Greenfield Community Television is your one-stop shop for all things local media. We provide free rental equipment, free training, free studio access to anyone who wants to make anything here in Greenfield and Franklin County. We are extremely excited today to host this debate with the Franklin County League of Women Voters. Just letting you know that if you ever wanted to host any type of debate regarding Greenfield or beyond, everyone is welcome to use this space. So that is me, and I'm going to pass it off now to the League of Women Voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Bella. Good evening, and welcome to this educational forum to discuss the Hope Street lot ballot question that will appear on next week's ballot here in Greenfield. I'm Marie Gauthier of the League of Women Voters of Franklin County. The League is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages informed and active participation in government. This forum is part of our ongoing voter education efforts to help voters make informed decisions at the upcoming Greenfield election. Our thanks to GCTV and Bella for partnering with us this evening. And I will now turn the meeting over to our moderator, Buzz Eisenberg, a litigation and civil rights attorney and a Greenfield Community College professor emeritus who was the college's head of governance for 17 years. Buzz has also served as Ashfield's town moderator for more than 20 years. Thank you, Buzz, for agreeing to moderate tonight's discussion.
Thank you, Marie Gauthier. And thank you in advance to our timekeepers, both educators, the venerable teacher Denise Petrin and Professor Emerita Ann Wiley. Thank you for what you're about to do. I think the first time I had the pleasure of moderating a forum with the League of Women Voters was about 20 years ago. I moderated a forum with 6 candidates for a Massachusetts House of Representatives position and 2 for Massachusetts Senate position. There were a total of 8 candidates. It was daunting, and I was so grateful that we had the experience and the integrity of the League of Women Voters to help. I have personally, we talk about how our democracy is imperiled right now, but I think that the county chapters of the League of Women Voters defends government of, by, and for the people, and I'm flattered that they invited me to participate with them and with GCTV in tonight's forum. So the format for tonight's discussion, which the panelists were informed of in advance, I understand, is as follows. Each of these 4 presenters, will have 5 minutes to make an opening statement. Questions will then follow. Those questions were solicited from the public in advance and reviewed by the League of Women Voters. Each presenter will be given 90 seconds to answer the questions after their 5-minute opening. Timekeepers, Ann and Denise, are sitting in the first row here. When there is a half-minute left in speaking time, a timekeeper will hold up a card to say 30 seconds to finish your answer. We ask you to finish your answer, but when you see that stop card, please finish crisply so that you could wrap up yours and we all have approximately the same amount of time. And finally, then, each presenter will be given 2 minutes to offer a closing statement. The forum will end promptly at 5 o'clock, if not sooner. I have a couple of requests of this great-looking audience that we have here in the studio. Number 1, please turn off or silence your phones so that we don't hear ringing phones. And 2, hold off on your applause. Presenters may say something that you like or don't like. Please do not audibly respond at the end. We'll have the opportunity to thank them together, but we don't want to be interrupting the flow by applauding or booing or anything else you might have in mind. The ballot question under discussion tonight, which is referred to as question 1, asks voters to decide if they want to rescind a July 16th, 2025 City Council measure. A yes vote on the ballot will rescind the City Council's measure that authorized the mayor to sell the Hope Street lot. That means the sale would be blocked and no development will move forward. A no vote will uphold the City Council's decision, allowing the city to sell the property for development. The city will then seek public input before issuing a request for proposals that might be referred to during our discussions here as RFP, requests for proposals from potential developers. That's the format we have. Any presenters have any questions about the format? Okay, I want to thank the panelists for joining us here to discuss the arguments for and against this question. One, they are the yes vote position panelists are Franklin County Register of Probate John Merrigan and William Wid Perry, who's the Precinct 7 City Councilor. The no vote position panelists are Amy K. Elaine, the Greenfield Director of Community and Development, and Susan Wargaftik. She is the Coordinator of Housing for Hope Street, and we will be hearing from them. So, without further ado, we will begin with these 5-minute opening statements we're about to enjoy. Initial speaker order was chosen with the assistance of an online randomizer. I have no idea what that is, but it sounds like they were randomly ordered. And I will then alternate the order from there. The statement order is Amy K. Elaine, then Susan Wargaftik, then Wid Perry, then John Merrigan. We'll start with Amy K. Elaine with Susan Wargaftik on deck.
Great. Do I need to turn this on at all?
I think
I am good to go. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for hosting this panel and giving us an opportunity to have a more in-depth conversation about Hope Street, and to my fellow panelists. Many of the conversations that have happened in the recent past have been in the City Council format, and while I love City Council, that format is not conducive to anything resembling conversation or question asking, and so I'm grateful for this opportunity. My opening statement is probably not going to be a full 5 minutes, but I do want to just highlight one, I want to highlight why the city's position is a yes on question 1. There was a mailer that was sent home by the folks who are encouraging you, sorry, the city's position is a no on question 1. There was a mailer sent home encouraging you to vote yes on question 1, and it says at the top of it that a yes vote sends a clear message that we want change. And from where I sit at the City Economic Development Office, it's very clear to me that a yes on question 1 sends the exact opposite. This is not a vote for change, it's a vote for a vacant lot. It's a vote for a stagnant vision of what Greenfield could be. It's a vote against growth, it's a vote against development, it's a vote against possibility. It's a vote not to welcome new families to our community. It's a vote not to welcome new students to our schools. And it's a vote not to explore just the potential of new commercial space and development downtown. If the folks voting yes really do want change, then that's wonderful, because so do we. We want the opportunity to craft an RFP, and we want the opportunity to see potential developers respond to what our vision is of what the city needs, and that's housing and mixed-use commercial space downtown. We support voting no because it's a vote for potential. It's a vote that would allow the property to be surplused, not binding us to do anything with it, but enabling us to explore the possibility of what might happen on that lot. We support voting no because it means that this property would be surplused. We could use the surplus vote to explore the potential for this lot to be developed into housing or mixed use and see what responses we get to the RFP. I'm excited about what that could mean. I'm excited for the community conversations that would follow as part of that process. And so I am looking forward to exploring all of that in more detail.
Thank you. Susan Wargaftik with William Perry on deck.
I also would like to thank the League of Women Voters and GCTV for giving us the opportunity to have this discussion. It's really an important issue that we need to consider. You're going to hear a lot of numbers and concepts about the Hope Street lot over the next hour. For these 5 minutes, I'd like you to hear what your neighbors are saying. I had other things that were going to be there, but I'm not going to use those. Okay, from Paul Jablin. Let me use my own family as an example. One stepson is a highly skilled machinist. His rent is being raised to $1,800 a month, so he must work overtime every week in order to make payments. My college-educated daughter, who is employed in health services, says it is likely they will need to move outside of Greenfield if they want to buy a house. My 27-year-old son, who is teaching full-time, could also not afford the $1,800 a month rent. There are currently hundreds of folks seeking affordable housing in Greenfield, and there's so little available that they cannot afford to live here. The housing emergency is real. From Wendy Sibison, more well-employed people living downtown means more life downtown. More restaurants, more shops, more music, more pubs, more poetry, more art. I imagine Hope Street tenants walking to the library, stopping at the bank, then heading down Main Street for coffee, a meal, a loaf of bread, a haircut, a bag of groceries in the convivial midst of others, friends, acquaintances, strangers, doing the same. From Ben Miner, any expectation of economic development for Greenfield needs to account for the ability to attract younger people to live here. Our town has for years been grudgingly seen as an affordable alternative to Northampton, but the rental market says otherwise. It is the young who spur the local economy and bring fresh energy and prosperous future to towns like ours. We need them and creating living spaces and economic conditions that attract them is simply good sense. From Michelle Shute, Greenfield Community College president. The payoff for investing in housing is enormous. 81% of GCC alumni stay in Franklin or Hampshire counties, where they buy homes, pay taxes, enroll their children in local schools, and strengthen the local economy. More housing doesn't just serve today's students, it anchors tomorrow's workforce. If we want a thriving Franklin County, one where young people don't have to choose between an education and having a roof over their heads, we must treat housing as an essential infrastructure. The future of Greenfield and of the region depends on it. From Emma Sadowski, do we really want to prioritize parking over people? Cars don't build community, change policy, clean up neighborhoods, or start businesses. Our parking lot provides no permanent jobs and sits empty much of the time. Housing, by contrast, strengthens our tax base, supports businesses, and brings vibrancy and people to downtown. And from Jim and Maggie Zakara, the owners of Hope and Olive. We certainly care about the needs of our customers and, in turn, the livelihood of our staff. But we also care about our community and about the long-term health of Greenfield. Allowing the Hope Street lot to be turned into housing will help all of us. That's why we support housing, not parking, and will be voting no on the ballot question on November 4th. It is for these and many other reasons that we ask you to vote no on question 1 on November 4th. A no vote supports a commitment to new opportunities for all of us, young and old, disabled people, families, businesses. The entire community will benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Whit Perry with John Merrigan following him.
Well, thank you to Susan and Amy, to John, to the League of Women Voters, to Buzz, of course, and to GCTV, and to everybody who came out today and everybody who's watching at home. As you know, I'm Councilor Perry from Precinct 7, but I've worked at 13 Prospect Street and Precinct 5 since 2007. Before the courthouse remodel, before the Y driveway redesign, before the parking garage, and before the temp fire station. So I've witnessed and dealt with the issues and confrontations involving parking for the Y, the courthouse, ServiceNet, and other area businesses. I know I'm in the minority with my fellow councilors in the City Hall, but someone needs to represent those who live and work in the Hope Street neighborhood and elsewhere in the city who don't feel like they are being heard on this issue. I want to thank Councilor Minhas for publicly coming out in favor of voting yes as well. You know, the real debate hasn't really changed since the vote in August. The last few months have actually got a little bit more confusing for a lot of people. We're being asked to vote on hopes and maybes and could be's regarding the future of the lot with no guarantees once the property is sold. and what actually might end up there regarding the type and definition of housing or any other possibilities that might end up there. I didn't imagine finding myself in this position and being at this forum, but part of being a counselor is representing all of the people and not getting swept in the prevailing winds. So I'm here to represent those who don't have the position, power, sway, or influence as a participant in this forum. I didn't think to bring a bunch of quotes from the yes side. I could have done that. But, everybody who's been following on social media knows what people are saying, what people are thinking. And I just want to make a point that it's not a vacant lot. It's a closed lot. It was closed by the city with no announcement. Does anybody remember when the city came out and announced that they were closing the Hope Street lot? Many people assumed that when the fire department left, the lot would open. It didn't open. There was no fanfare. There was no announcement. It just didn't open. And it took weeks, months, almost a year for people to say, why isn't the lot open? And now we hear why, after the fact, after the vote, after the debate. And so it's important to remember that the lot is closed. It's not vacant. It's not abandoned. It was closed by choice.
Thank you. John Merrigan.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the community on this important issue. I acknowledge Susan and Amy and thank them for being part of this discussion as well, and thank you, Buzz, for being our moderator. One of the things that this issue has really done to me has me looking at lots and lots of the studies that were done, and they're fairly recent. I find it pretty interesting that the county study that we hear of has a production target of 3,000 units across all of Franklin County. And if you look at it, the Executive Office of Housing, Livable Communities, which is I call the governor's study, they call for 211 units countywide. And they refer to the western part of Franklin County as having a need. I think we have 200 and some odd units in the pipeline now, given what's out for development. To say that, we're not welcoming or we're not, trying to bring people into the community, we're trying to bring people into the process. 10 people voted to sell this lot, and there was no public input. There was no public notice whatsoever. People argue, oh, yeah, we were talking about it. Well, I'll challenge anybody that's watching this show to look back in your own memory and see if you were told this lot was going to be put up for sale by the city council. It wasn't made public, and there was no public input, and that's what this process is doing, is allowing the voters to have a say. The theory and the notion that, bringing people to our downtown to shop, to eat, well, they got to go somewhere to eat and shop because we don't have a lot of places that they can go to. But I take, for example, the high-rise, right up on the top of the street. I take the Weldon and the buildings on both sides of it, all the way to Main Street and all the multi-units along there, the Reed Block, all the multis around there, the Mill House, all the multis in those neighborhoods. Those are people in our downtown. So if we're going to take, 40, 50 more people, that's going to cure downtown? Or are we just going to keep putting more and more housing in our downtown? There won't be a downtown. Greenfield has done its share, and it's really a county issue because that's how the study was looked at through the Executive Office of Housing. It was a county study. It wasn't a Greenfield study. And I've made the point before, Greenfield has done its share. We're number 9 out of 351 cities and towns, and we've done a phenomenal job of helping those in need. And I've been on the front line of that during my career in the legislature, and I've been on the front line of helping our residents in need in the courts. And I make no apologies for wanting our community to have some input on what goes on a taxpayer-owned piece of land. Thank you.
Thank each of you and all of you. That concludes our opening statements. Let's move to the questions portion of our discussion. Question 1. Can you discuss the comparison between the revenue that would come to the city if the lot is returned to use for paid parking or developed into housing and retail? We'll start with Susan Orgaftik and then Wid Perry.
Sure. We very honestly do not know what the size of the development would be, so we can't say for sure what the income would be from the development that would happen there. However, the high-rise pays around $170,000 a year to the city, and we can assume that it would be in that range. We just don't know because it depends on how many apartments there would be, how many other if there's commercial would make a difference as well. What I can tell you is the estimates on the parking lot bringing in $200,000 a year is a fantasy. If there are 112 units in that parking spot, at 50 cents an hour, which is what we presently pay, at 10 hours a day, 365 days a year, we end up with $204,000. That means that there would be no spot that would be open ever. And on top of that, if you add the fact that we don't charge for parking on the weekends, that amount goes down by over $58,000. So the idea that there's $200,000 worth of parking that would happen in that lot and that would happen within that small period of time is a fantasy.
Thank you, Susan. I should have reminded us all that there's 90 seconds for these answers. Wid Perry with John Merrigan on deck.
Thanks. And as you just heard Susan says, who knows? And I want to say, who cares? Really, and the bottom line, it doesn't really matter. So apples or oranges, money is money. But I can tell you that it's always been a parking lot. It was been a parking lot for who knows how long, who can remember the 1950s that we used as a private, and then the city bought it sometime, and it's been parking. There's no mystery. And if someone wants to argue the parking lot wasn't being used, come on. Everybody watching at home has used that parking lot over the years to go to court, to go to any of the business downtown, to when the Y lot was full, the parking lot was being used. And when the remodeling came in for the courthouse, they took away a lot of the back parking. You remember there was a big lot behind the courthouse. That was eaten up by the remodel. People used Hope Street parking even more. The Y had to redesign their driveway, and that created more housing issues. The parking lot is used. It was full. It's always full. Before and after the parking garage went in, the parking lot is used. So who do you want to help? People who need parking or a hopeful housing situation?
Thank you. John Merrigan with Amy K. Lane on deck.
Thank you. I have never used the figure 200,000. I've seen it. I've seen people use it. I have used the fact that pre-pandemic, the parking income for the city of Greenfield was $600,000. It's somewhere in the $300,000 range. You have to factor in also the library is now where what we call the fire station lot. And anybody here can remember that lot on both sides was full all the way down to the behind the Reed building. You can remember the parking lot out behind the courthouse. It was full. And to say, to people that need to stop at the courthouse for a quick pick up a paper or somebody going in Salvation Army for 5 minutes, or somebody has to go in the Department of Mental Health with a child or a family member for services, that they can go and park in the parking garage. And it's a parking garage that isn't managed well. I was in Boston yesterday. I had to go to 2 different parking garages. Guess what? They got gates on them. You get in and out. You pull your ticket, you park. Here you got to pull up an app. How many people have an app to park in the parking garage or park in downtown Greenfield? Good. Well, I know a lot of people that don't. And when people pull up to town for the first time, then, they're caught off guard, and they're scrambling for parking.
Thank you.
Yep.
Our second question, 90-second answers. Oh, Amy, I'm so sorry. I had a check mark next to you.
I didn't forget.
I first want to say that the answer to a challenging or problematic parking garage is not to ignore that it exists and return a second lot a block away to parking. I think the mayor has been very proactive in making changes to the parking lot. She's listening to citizen concerns around safety, around cleanliness. We are listening to people who have trouble with the app. We're getting in new kiosks that will allow you to pay with cash as opposed to using the app. So I think that there's a multitude of ways that we can improve some of the challenges for parking in that neighborhood that don't require us to return Hope Street lot to parking, but that can allow us to put a more productive use to that lot. And I think it's a little unfair to compare just straight up parking revenue, which is a very static use of that property. It's a parking lot. It will always serve the cars and generate whatever we're charging per hour, versus a development that could bring in both housing and commercial space. And that's not only increased property taxes, that's dollars that follow students that come in that can support our schools. That could be commercial space on the first floor that can do job creation. It opens up a lot more possibilities than a static use of a parking lot.
Thank you, Amy, and I'm sorry. Now, second question. What do you think is likely to happen with the Armory building, and how would that affect the Hope Street lot? We'd Perry first with John Merrigan on deck.
I have no idea. I've been watching the work going on over there. It's kind of exciting and interesting. But you notice there's no parking. So no matter what, we've all heard rumors. The mayor's talked about it at previous council meetings. We've all heard rumors. It's going to be, housing. It's going to be condo. We don't know what's going to go in there, but we do know there's no parking for that area. And so whatever goes in there is going to be a parking issue added on that. And I understand what you're saying, Amy. But we also know that people haven't been using the parking garage, and you can put a bow and a ribbon on it and have bells and whistles, and people are still not going to park there. We can't force people to park in the parking garage, which, by the way, was built mostly for the transportation center and not really for Greenfield, but that's okay. People see the lot. Old-timers know the lot. People like the lot. It's convenient. It helps. Let's not forget people. People. I know it's parking over people, but it's also people park. And so we have to keep that in mind when we're talking about this stuff.
Thank you, John Merrigan and Amy Kaylane. I won't forget you. You're on deck.
So it's interesting. The Armory was always on my mind as I watched this property be passed off from the council to the mayor for sale. And I said to myself one Monday morning, coming back from being away for the weekend, I was going to stop it. And I looked him up through the LLC, the owner of the Armory building, and I thought he was using it for storage because I didn't see any real activity there. But I found out that he has the big factory that makes a lot of furniture in Deerfield and does a ton of business on Wayfair and does a lot of on Lowe's with his furniture, and learned. And Mark Zacchio was with me. I didn't want to make it a political meeting, so I asked Mark if he'd come. And Mark was picking his brain, and Mark was sharing some of his projects that he had done, in Greenfield. Great work Mark does. And we were just trying to find out what his thoughts were. And at one point during the discussion, he said he wanted to put housing in there without any state subsidy or any funds that would be required to make it a successful project. He's very, I think, resourceful, and I think for me to be the first one, why was some citizen who's concerned about that parking lot having to make that inquiry in the town? Nobody from the town ever went there and talked to him.
Thank you, John Merrigan. Amy Kaylane with Susan Wergaftig on deck.
On that first note that John Merrigan just pointed out, the town did reach out to him. He chose not to respond to the outreach. But I appreciate the question. I, like everybody else, have heard the same rumors about the Armory, that it will be housing. That would be wonderful. But the question gives me an opportunity to point out one of the beauties of the RFP process, which is what the Hope Street lot would go through should it be surplused. And it allows us to mandate or ask developers in the text of the RFP to provide the city with what their plan is for parking. So we can say in the RFP, we want to make sure that your proposal shows us that you won't add a burden to on-street parking. We could ask them to provide a certain number of parking spaces for their tenants or purchase permits, or we have that flexibility to draw some parameters and ask questions within the context of an RFP. Unlike the Armory development, where that's a private property, it's owned by a private developer, and he's doing, whatever he's doing, and we can ask questions, but we're a little bit at his mercy.
Thank you. Susan Wargaftik.
The Armory, I tried to contact the owner of the Armory property also, and received no response. And I did it by mail to try to make sure that he had all the information of how to contact us. The Armory project, as I understand it, and from people who have been inside the building and looked at it quite thoroughly, has 18-inch walls. That's and very small windows. It may be possible to build apartments in that building. I don't know. I'm not a developer of any kind. However, whatever it is, if there's no subsidy, it means it's going to be at least market rate apartments and possibly luxury apartments, in which case he can buy the slots in the parking garage for those apartments. So I don't see that there's any problem or any conflict.
Thank you. And once again, RFP is request for proposal. I think we know that. Question 3. Other than housing or parking, what other possible uses could you see for this lot? John Merrigan, followed by Amy K. Elaine.
Thank you, Buzz. That's a great question. I wish we as a community had that opportunity to engage and to discuss what possibilities could go there. It could be half and half. It could be a quarter of it could be parking to satisfy the needs of the neighborhood or the Armory. I've said before, we get 300 people a day on a busy day. If we're impaneling juries in the courthouse, we have as much as 350 people in there. And because of people, if you have a mobility need, doesn't necessarily mean you have a handicap placard. And people have trouble walking up hills and even, 100 yards away up top of the street. And in the past, we've had those spots where they were close to the courthouse, and people utilize them a lot. Those handicap parking spots were utilized quite frequently. So, but hey, whatever way it goes, the mayor was going to come over and, when I met with her month and a half ago, and talk to the court community. That never happened, Amy. That was that meeting we had, and there's been no engagement. And this is engagement by petition, by referendum, and it's sad we have to do it this way. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy K. Elaine, Susan Wargaftik, you're on deck.
I think the mayor's ability to come over and engage in that way was limited once this became a ballot referendum. But I would imagine that she would be over once this issue is passed. In terms of public input, we did have public open meetings with the community. There are some people in this room that were at those meetings. And we solicited their input in terms of what they would like to see at that lot. And we've heard overwhelmingly housing. We've also heard concern about the loss of commercial space downtown, and we've heard a desire perhaps for some green space. And once again, the RFP process allows us to identify community interests that they would like to see at that lot within the broad parameters that the city has decided are important. I think the mayor's been very clear, as have all of the reports that have come out both at the local, the county, and the state level, that housing is needed, and the best place to build housing is where it's walkable to transportation, it's walkable to stores and restaurants, and it's in an area where we already have existing public water and sewer. The Hope Street lot fits all of those definitions. And so I think that we've heard from the community that housing really is the most important thing, and we're looking forward, if it goes through the RFP process, to having a conversation about what that might look like or what other things might be included.
Thank you. Susan Wergaftig with Wood Perry on deck.
I went back and looked in my old date books to remember when the first time I had a conversation with anyone in city government about this project. And it was in October 2022. And it was with Mayor Wiedegartner, who at no time talked about it returning to being a parking lot. In 2023, we held 2 community meetings. They were widely advertised in the newspaper. There was door-to-door effort to make sure that neighbors came. There was one in August and one in September. We had 35 people from the community in the first one, and we had 20 people from the community in the second one. And among the people who were in the first one was Mayor Wiedegartner. At no time was there discussion about it being a parking lot. The discussion revolved around housing, green space, and small commercial things like a coffee shop or some other neighborhood-related business. This is not a new idea. We have brought up Hope Street before at city council meetings, long before the discussion happened for the actual vote. This is something that the community has been involved in for a long time.
Thank you. Wood Perry.
No one kind of answered the question. The question was, what would happen if it was not housing or parking? I think Happy Boynton would probably say pickleball courts, but we don't, it's not a great place. It's next to a courthouse and a mental health facility. So you have to be careful about what you want to put there. Parking is convenient for a lot of people, for a lot of places, for a lot of reasons. Did anybody ask the mayor, what about parking? I mean, it sounds like a setup. The first question I would have asked was, well, could there be parking there? No one asked that question. It was all pro-housing. People went to those meetings because most of the other people didn't realize what was happening. That's why it's been pro-housing, 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 because the other people didn't know or didn't understand what was going on. So the parking was never a part of the conversation. I think if people in the Hope Street area knew that there was a conversation going on about housing, they might have shown up and asked about the parking. No one knew it was not going to be parking. We were never told it wasn't going to be parking. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. Next question. Can you address the concerns about city infrastructure and resources if the lot is developed? That is, water, sewer, fire, schools, etc. We'll begin with Amy Kaelane, followed by Susan Wergaftig.
Thanks for asking this question. As part of our thinking about this lot, the mayor talked with DPW, with police, with fire, and with schools to ensure, before we headed too far down this path, that all of those departments felt comfortable that there was not going to be increased strain on any of those facilities. As I mentioned before, water and sewer, public water and sewer already exist downtown. It's not a place where there's private septic. And bringing these additional people in, should we add housing or housing and commercial use, will help spread out the cost for this infrastructure work, should any be needed, over additional people.
Well, thank you. Susan.
I will bow to Amy on the city infrastructure questions, because the city leadership knows far better than I do what those issues are. I'd like to respond to something Wid said, though. Among the people who attended the meeting, on the first meeting in August of 2023, was Dawn Morin, who is a key member of the Yes Group. And she was very clear that she wanted commercial on that lot, and she made that statement several times. So to say that there was no one who had any other interest other than housing at that meeting is inaccurate. And the other question that came up was that there was discussion about parking, but it was related to the fact that the people who had passes from the courthouse were still parking in those in spots on the street. And so what we did is, with Mayor Wiedegartner, changed the requirements for parking on Prospect Street and Hope Street, and that made a difference.
And thank you. Wid, Perry.
Well, the developer's going to tell us what can happen there. It's not going to be the city. We haven't. No one's come in there to study it from a developer's viewpoint. So they may come in and say, "Forget it." There's too much. Who knows what they're going to find underneath? So we'll find out from the developer down the road sometime. I'm not sure if bringing Dawn Moore into the conversation is a fair thing to do with her not being here to say yay or nay on that. I mean, we all know how Dawn feels and what she's been talking about. She would forgo parking for something else, but I don't think she's hot to trot about commercial development there as far as housing, because she feels that the downtown area should be represented first.
John Merrigan.
Thank you. So infrastructure is a huge issue for the city of Greenfield. The city of Greenfield is under a consent order by the Department of Environmental Protection, Amy, and I'm sure you're aware of it. And it said that the figures are roughly $7 million to upgrade that plant. That plant, over the past 3 years, has let untreated waste into our riverway to the tune of 2.3 million gallons, overflowing from that plant, untreated sewage. And, you passed in the city council the resolution, find the polluters. Well, let's find Greenfield, because we're one of the worst polluters in Western Mass. So, until we get our infrastructure straightened out, we need to take a time out. We have a lot on the pipeline. Let's not keep going and going and going to satisfy those that think housing is the answer to all. We have a downtown that needs storefronts. People are moving out. When I met with you and the city councilor a month ago, I asked, have you seen any new proposals coming into town in terms of businesses? I've only seen them leaving. So people in this community are pretty aware of what our downtown is looking like. And if you think it's good downtown, then God bless you.
Thank you. Next question. If the property is sold for development, what restrictions would you like to see on the types of uses allowed? We'll begin with Susan Orgaftik, then Wid Perry.
This is my personal belief, because I believe that we've got to go through a community process to do this, which includes the request for proposal process that Amy's been talking about, but in addition, it also means that we go through the planning board and we go through zoning if that's what's necessary. So this is not a closed process. But for myself, I would like to see housing units, probably 40, maybe 50 homes, I don't know, of a variety of sizes, ranging from efficiency to probably 2-bedroom, and housing that would be available for our disabled population, which is really in need of housing. Our infrastructure in terms of housing does not really support the housing for people in wheelchairs or people who have serious mobility issues. So those would be things that I would want to see. I'd also like to see green space. And I would like to see, I personally would like to think locally oriented commercial would be a good idea.
Thank you. Wid Perry, John Merrigan, you're on deck.
If no passes and the city gets a great deal and a developer comes in and offers a great product and project, I'm all for that. I still don't think that's the best place for a housing development. I just don't think the neighborhood is right for that. But I would support whatever ends up there, and hopefully that works out for everybody years from now.
Thank you. John Merrigan with Amy Kaylane on deck.
The notion that you're going to put commercial businesses in that location, just go there on any day. Wednesday I was down there, you couldn't find a spot anywhere. And if you think you want to set up a entity, an investment for failure, you put commercial down there because, as I pointed out, if people want to run in and get that coffee, that's a 5-minute stop. They got to go to the parking garage. They're not going to stop there. So it's just not good planning. And it was going to be market rate housing the whole time. Market rate, market rate, market rate, we heard. And then just a week and a half ago from the mayor at a city council meeting, well, wow, there might be an affordable component to it. And that's going to be a subsidy from the state because it's the bond bill money. And with that comes strings attached. And there's going to be a fair share of that property will be affordable housing. So, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck.
Well, thank you. Amy Kaylane.
Hard to follow that, but
You could quack, I guess.
I think the question was restrictions that I would like to see either on the property or on the RFP, and I would just like to say on the RFP, I'm actually hoping for as few restrictions as possible other than a developer looking to do housing so that we can see what creative ideas come into play. I am not a developer, not my forte. I do community and economic development, and I work with those who have expertise in what they could design to fit on a particular lot. So I'm hoping that we're able to highlight some hopes of the community. That includes green space. I've heard that from multiple folks. And then see what options we get and evaluate them from there. And I did just want to say, I feel like people are disparaging this lot. You said if we wanted to put commercial there, that would set it up for failure. I think Hope and Olive is one of downtown's most beloved commercial institutions, and it is right there. And I think there are a lot of things that we can do for on-street parking to make it easier. We can add 15-minute spots. We can rearrange the layout so that if a coffee shop did go in there, folks could go in and out. But I think it's a beautiful location in town. I think it's perfectly situated for some commercial space as well as some housing. And just wanted to mention that.
This panel has been so efficient. We do have time for extra questions, so I think we have time for one. And I think I'd like to ask this one. If an RFP happens, how much community input in crafting the RFP do you think is appropriate, and how should that happen? Let's start with Wid Perry. John Merrigan, you're on deck.
Well, I think we're having this debate because people feel like they weren't heard. They're not being heard. And so I would I would like to see plenty of public meetings, everybody invited, everybody have a say in what could go in there. And I just think that people there's been a lot of lobbying and a lot of, proactive stuff happening. And I think people that talked to me said, this is news to me, and I wish I knew this was coming down the pike. And so people, we're going to have a trust issue no matter what happens. There's going to be a trust issue because people feel we've done this before, and here we go again, promises made, stand by us, we know what we're doing, and then, who knows what's going to happen down the road. So people just want to have a say in the entire process.
Thank you. John Merrigan with Amy Kaylane.
Well, I think I've already indicated, where I thought the breakdown was, and that was engaging the community, engaging the abutters, engaging the Department of Mental Health, their ServiceNet staff, engaging the court staff. I would hope that happens. And I really, genuinely, I'm not going to lose any sleep if this goes not my way. But, if it does go, a way for development, of course, this is our town. This is our community. We need to do what's right for the community at the end of the day. And I just want to make a point about housing that, housing doesn't make money. It costs $8,000 on average to have, water, sewer to the city, where the average tax bill is $5,800. Why do you think we get $20 million in local aid every year from the state? We're not making money on housing. We need help beyond what we're bringing in the property taxes. So this isn't a moneymaker, people.
Amy Kaylane and Susan Wargaftek, you're next.
I'm going to say, first, just to comment on that point a little bit, that housing isn't a moneymaker. We're going to have to pay for infrastructure upgrades anyway, whether we have 17,000 people living here, 15,000 people living here, or 20,000 people living here. I would like my property tax bill to be divided amongst a few more people when those infrastructure upgrades happen. And so I think housing, in addition to the comments that I've made, that I think housing is not just a dollars and cents game. These are people, these are families. We have a community with a declining population, and we need to invite some new folks in. With respect to the RFP and how much input, I'm looking at Councillor Bullock because I made a promise to her at City Council, and you're right, this is a trust issue. And I am only as good as my word and my promises that I make. And I said to Councillor Bullock that there would be public input should the RFP process go through, and I stand by that. We had public meetings before this, and we will have public meetings again. I think it's challenging to decide something of this magnitude by it's one of those decisions by committee. So I think that the city has identified that we want housing or mixed use there, and I think that the public input would be around what that housing should look like and what else we should provide, or what types of parameters we should put around that housing development.
Susan Wergaftig.
This has never been a closed process. This has been a process that has involved residents of the neighborhood from the beginning. And I fully expect, in the conversations I have had with Amy and with the mayor, that it will continue to be an open process. But it will be an open process that also gives, not just at the RFP stage, but uses our present organizational and city departments. We have a planning board. We have a zoning board of appeals. All of those things are going to be in use in this, regardless whether the proposal comes in and somehow that proposal is decided upon through a public process, then we still have to go through planning board. We still have to go through zoning. All of those things are going to be part of the process. So there are going to be enormous numbers of ways in which people are going to be able to respond to this. And I don't think it's a closed process at all.
Thank you. That'll conclude our question portion of our discussion, and it's time for closing statements. Each panelist will have 2 minutes in the inverse order, the reverse order that we had opening. So we'll begin with Register John Merrigan, followed by Councillor Wid Perry. John.
Thank you. Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for hosting this. It is timely that the election is Tuesday, and believe me, people want this question behind them on both sides, and I respect that. I'm going to start with what I opened, is that these numbers need to be looked at more carefully. You're telling the county that we need 3,000 units. That's 26 cities and towns, Greenfield being one city, that we need 3,000 units. And when in fact the state housing study is saying way less. And I think it should alarm every community in Franklin County that these numbers are being used for a cause to create this frenzy of housing. We have a wage disparity issue in Franklin County. We need jobs. We need good paying jobs so people can pay the rent. And it's not all Greenfield again. It's a county issue. And Greenfield has done a lot, and we will continue to do a lot. But let's balance it. Let's bring in jobs. Let's bring in economic development. Let's bring in retail, and let's fix our infrastructure. And if we want to help some people in our community, I admit the elderly, need housing. And why not look at the Kennemetal plan? It was done with, the Mill House, and it was done with the Weldon. And I buy that concept of moving people out, widowers, or even elderly couples, into housing that is affordable elderly housing. Let's look at the Kennemetal. I'll challenge you, and I'll help you. So let's think bigger, and let's not just try to jam it in, behind the courthouse on a small piece of land. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Wood Perry, followed by Coordinator Susan Orgaftik.
Well, thank you, Buzz, and the League of Women Voters, to Susan, to Amy, to John. The Hope Street lot is not going to make it or break it as far as the housing goes in Greenfield. Everybody, it sounds like if we don't get housing on Hope Street, all is lost. We have Wilson's, an exciting project. We have the other project on Mill Street, on Main Street. We have the CSO shelter on Wells Street being built. There's plenty of other housing that you've showed us at council coming in. So Hope Street is not a make it or break it deal, but it's be presented that way. We've already kind of, talking about all the commissions and boards, we've already kind of done that. We've kind of greased the skids getting ready for this with the ordinance changes, the zoning changes, all that stuff's been happening, So it goes back to the trust issue. People are, and I just have to mention how kind of dirty it's gotten on social media and people, talking about, race baiting and dog whistles and the tactics have been used is just very, very disappointing for this city. And that's been my biggest disappointment of all, just how the game is played in this town. It doesn't reflect well on any of us. So a yes vote cements the idea of voters having power through a referendum and reminds City Council and City Hall that the voter still has a say in what happens in their community. The reason some people are voting yes is because they don't trust the people promoting no. We got to face that. There's a trust issue. So send a message to City Hall and the City Council to slow the runaway train on the whole housing anywhere, anyplace, anytime push. Let's not repeat past mistakes when promises become problems.
Thank you. Coordinator Susan Orgaftik, followed by Director Amy Kaling.
At the beginning of our discussion, I quoted comments from your neighbors about why they believe you should vote no. We've talked today about visions of our city, about statistics, about studies, and on November 4th, it's going to be up to you. I now ask you to consider what you think is best for Greenfield. Greenfield has great potential. We have a community college, a beautiful and vibrant library, a hospital, lovely parks that are used daily even in wintertime, a variety of community organizations ranging from the Moose to Community Action to churches and our synagogue. We have a politically active community that cares about what happens to the city. And most of all, we have the potential to build on this. Building housing on the Hope Street lot is just one small part of making this potential a reality, but it is an important one. Housing has a multiplier effect, encouraging the development of businesses, services, and other resources because the people there need them. If you want to expand the availability of new and better housing for seniors, young adults, disabled people, and families, vote no. If you believe that housing is a better use of the Hope Street lot than parking, vote no. If you believe that housing on the Hope Street lot will add vibrancy to our downtown and offer new opportunities for the development of businesses, vote no. If you believe that housing on Hope Street will add to the city's tax base, vote no. If you believe that Greenfield should not only look at its past, but also look toward its future to create a really vibrant community, vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Amy Kaling.
I'm going to use my closing statement to talk for a minute about process and to hit on WID's focus, which I think is rightly so, on community input and on trust. A no vote allows community engagement to move forward. It allows the process of a public conversation to move forward. A no vote would move this to the spot where we engage in community input, we craft an RFP, we send it out to developers, the developers respond, and we gather with a committee to review those proposals. If there's one that seems to meet our needs, we advance it through the zoning process and the planning board, exactly as Susan had outlined. And at every single step along the way, there's opportunity for public input, public conversation, public engagement as a community about what we see as the best future for Hope Street. You want to bring good paying jobs in? Me too. And what I hear from some of our best paying employers, are that their employees can't find housing, that they make job offers and people walk away because there's nowhere for them to live. They don't want to commute the distance that it takes for them to find housing. Hope Street isn't going to solve everything, but it's a beautiful location in the heart of our downtown, and it could be a piece. And so I'm encouraging folks to vote no in order to continue this community engagement process and allow the city to continue to build that trust.
Well, thank you. Thank you again to each of you panelists. Very efficient. You didn't take as much time as you were allotted, but you did take a lot of your own time to discuss this ballot question 1 with us tonight. I want to thank GCTV for helping us bring this discussion virtually to everyone who is able to join us today. I want to especially thank the League of Women Voters for continuing their mission to provide voters the most precious tool in our electoral toolbox, which is information that we need in order to make sound decisions when we approach the ballot box. Election Day is this coming Tuesday, November 4th, at the Greenfield High School Gymnasium at 21 Bar Avenue. Voting hours are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Vote-by-mail ballots must be received by the city clerk's office by 8 o'clock on Election Day. Vote-by-mail ballots can be returned by mail. They could be dropped off at the clerk's office or dropped in the City Hall drop box located next to the entrance on the north side of City Hall by 8 o'clock on Election Day. Please remember to vote. Get out there and vote. Thank you. Thank each of you. Thank you, League. Thank you, GCTV.